She laughed, loud, sharp, cruel. My own sister, standing under a spotlight at her rooftop birthday party, held up the white envelope I gave her like it was trash. "Guess she couldn't afford wrapping paper," she said. And the room, our family, laughed with her. My mom didn't stop her. My dad looked away. And my 9-year-old son, Noah, clutched my arm and whispered, "Mom, why is Aunt Lena being mean to you?" That's when I stood up. You want to know the truth? I didn't want to go to that party. Not because I didn't love her, but because I knew exactly what it would be like. Lena's parties are always performances. Flashy gowns, champagne towers, expensive friends, and always someone she's chosen to make the punchline. This year, that someone was me. But I still came. I dressed Noah in his best shirt, I put on the only nice dress I owned, and I walked in with my head high. I didn't come to impress anyone. I came because I had something in my bag, a plain white envelope that was going to change everything. You see, while they were laughing at my life, my 2 jobs, my old car, my quiet little corner of the world, I was building something they couldn't see. And tonight, they were about to, because I didn't come to fight. I came to rewrite the story they'd been telling about me for years. And it started with that envelope. I'm 32, divorced, single mom. I work 2 jobs, one at a bakery in the early mornings, the other doing admin for a dental clinic most evenings. It's not glamorous, but it's honest. I don't go out on weekends. I haven't bought new clothes in years. But my son? He never goes without. His name is Noah. He's 9. Quiet, sensitive, with a kindness that most grown-ups don't even try to have anymore. He notices everything, especially when people treat me like I'm invisible. That's how it's always been at family events. My mother, Diane, is all about appearances. Perfect hair, perfect smile, perfect family. Or at least that's the image she wants to project. She always says she raised us with class, but in her eyes, only one of her daughters turned out the way she hoped. Lena. Lena is 28. She walks into a room and people notice. Her hair, her clothes, her voice, it all belongs in a magazine. She's the influencer of the family. Big online following, sponsored trips, free designer bags. And somehow she always knows the right thing to say. When she wants something. She has our mother wrapped around her finger. And our father, Richard. He stays silent, especially when things get uncomfortable. He's not cruel, he's just not present. A glass of wine, a glance at his phone. That's how he disappears. For years I told myself it didn't matter, that I didn't need to be seen by them, that raising a good human like Noah was more important than being anyone's favorite. But the truth is, it still hurt. The sideways glances, the patronizing questions, the way no one ever asked how I was really doing. They didn't know that while they pitied me for my small life, I was building something they couldn't see. Every morning at 4 a.m., before Noah woke up, I mixed oils, melted butters, poured them into jars by hand. I took online business courses late at night. I sold scrubs and lotions on Etsy and at farmers markets. Quietly, slowly. I didn't tell anyone, not even my parents, because I wasn't building it for their approval. I was building it for me. So when my mom called and asked, "Are you actually coming to Lena's party this year?" I said yes. I said yes, not because I wanted to be part of the show. I said yes, because I was ready for them to finally see me. I didn't park close to the venue. The valet line felt unnecessary, out of place for someone like me. So I parked 3 blocks away and walked holding Noah's hand, our footsteps echoing on the sidewalk. He looked so handsome. Little blue button-up shirt, the one I bought last fall and kept in the back of his drawer for something nice. His hair was combed back just right. His shoes were clean. He had no idea I was nervous. But I was. You see, when you've been treated like the invisible one for so long, even just showing up starts to feel like rebellion. We stepped off the elevator into a rooftop, bathed in gold string lights and music I couldn't name. The air smelled like expensive perfume and catered appetizers. White balloons bobbed over tables trimmed in gold. Waiters walked by balancing trays of drinks I didn't recognize. And in the middle of it all, Lena. dressed like a starlet in silver silk drink in hand, head thrown back in laughter. Her friends were gathered around like a spotlight followed her from room to room. She saw me. Of course she did. But her smile didn't change. Just a quick glance like I was someone she barely remembered from high school. I stepped forward anyway. "Happy birthday," I said with a polite smile. She leaned in just enough for a side hug, the kind you give to strangers you don't like but want to be polite around. "Wow," she said. "You actually showed up." Then she turned to Noah with a completely different tone, soft, sugar-sweet. "Hey, kiddo." And just like that, she spun away back into her crowd of champagne and sequins. I took a breath, looked down at Noah. He gave me a small shrug like, "Was that okay?" And I smiled and nodded, even though my chest was already tight. We found a quieter corner near the edge of the deck. There was a good view of the city, and it felt a little less like we were on someone else's stage. "No soda?" Noah asked. I walked to the bar and asked if they had anything without alcohol. The bartender blinked at me like I'd asked in a different language. Maybe water?" He didn't offer it. He just wandered off. I walked back empty-handed. "You okay, Mom?" Noah asked. "I'm okay." I lied. "We won't stay too long." We stood there for nearly an hour watching people float around like butterflies. Everyone in expensive clothes, heels too high, lips too red. The kind of crowd where people talk more about who they know than what they feel. A few relatives came up to me. They asked the usual questions. "Oh, you're still working at that bakery? Still in that same little apartment? Are you seeing anyone yet?" Each question was dipped in sweetness, but laced with something else, pity maybe. Or judgment. I'm not sure which is worse. And then the music got softer. Someone dimmed the lights. Lena stepped up on a little stage near the bar. Just a raised platform, but it was enough to command the room. She clinked her glass gently and smiled. "I just want to say thank you," she began. "To my friends for being fabulous. To my parents for always supporting me. For always believing in my dreams." She looked right past me when she said it. And then someone shouted, "Open your gifts." A wave of clapping followed like we were all extras in her movie. She started tearing through the presents with flair. Spa packages, gift cards, designer perfumes. She held each one up like a game show prize, giggling and tossing paper over her shoulder. Noah tugged on my hand. "Can we go now soon, baby? Just a few more minutes." Then she held up my envelope. Plain white. No glitter. No bow. "What's this?" she said, holding it up like it smelled funny. "Oh, it's from Ava," she added with a grin that wasn't friendly. The crowd looked at me. I felt the warmth rise up my neck. "Guess she couldn't afford wrapping paper," she said. Some people laughed, not loud, but enough. She probably couldn't afford a gift at all. This time the laughter hit harder, clearer, like glass cracking. I looked at Noah. He was confused, embarrassed, hurt. "Why is she saying that?" he whispered. I bent down. "It's okay. She just doesn't understand." But in that moment, something in me changed. It wasn't anger. It wasn't sadness. It was a quiet voice inside me that simply said, "Enough." The laughter still echoed. Soft, polite laughter, the kind that slices deeper than yelling ever could. I felt it in my chest, like something heavy settling in. But I didn't cry. I didn't shrink. I looked at Lena still holding my plain white envelope in her manicured fingers, and I stood up. No rush, no drama. I gently let go of Noah's hand and walked toward her. Step by step, my heels clicking against the rooftop tiles, steady and clear. Lena watched me come with a half smirk, like she thought I was about to explain myself, or worse, apologize. Instead, I stopped right in front of her, smiled softly, and said, "If you're going to open it, go ahead." She blinked, not expecting that. The smirk faltered just a little, but she recovered quickly, always the performer, and slid her long fingernail under the flap. The room quieted. People leaned in just slightly. You could hear glasses clink somewhere in the back. The band had paused, sensing the shift. She pulled out the check first. It was folded once neatly. She opened it, and her face changed. Gone was the smugness. Her lips parted. Her eyebrows lifted ever so slightly. She looked down again, double-checked the number, then looked at the letter I had tucked behind it. Her eyes scanned the words. And then, she sat down. Not a dramatic faint. Not for attention. She simply sat. Like her legs couldn't hold her anymore. I didn't say a word. Everyone was watching her, but I kept my eyes on Noah. He was still in the corner, his little face trying to read the room. But then he looked at me, and I saw it. That expression. Not confusion, not fear, pride. He didn't know the details, but somehow he knew. That his mom, the quiet one who always stood back, had just done something important. Lena was still holding the check like it might burn her fingers. The room was hushed. She looked up at me finally, her voice barely a whisper. "Is this real?" I nodded. Calm, no bitterness, just truth. "Yes, it's real." My parents were staring now too. My mom's eyes wide, frozen in disbelief. My dad's hand dropped from his wine glass. For once he wasn't pretending to scroll on his phone. The tension in the air felt thick, like someone had cracked open a secret no one was supposed to hear. Then someone asked the same cousin who'd asked me earlier if I was still single. "What's in the envelope?" Lena swallowed, looked down again. She didn't say anything at first. So I spoke. "It's a check." People leaned in. $25,000. Gasps. Whispers. Now all eyes were on me. She held up the letter with trembling hands. Her voice cracked as she read aloud. "For years I watched you dream. Start ideas you never finished. Wait for someone else to believe in you. You never expected it to come from me, but here it is. No strings. Use it or don't. Either way, this isn't about the money. It's about reminding you that I am not the person you say I am. I never was. From your sister, yes, the one you called a failure." I let the silence speak. They didn't know that while they were laughing at me, I was waking up at 4 every morning to fill skincare orders by hand. That I was teaching myself branding, digital marketing, and product photography while they were sipping cocktails and sharing filtered selfies. They didn't know that I'd turned a side hustle into a real business, that I'd signed a deal 3 weeks ago to expand it, that I was no longer the girl struggling to get by. Because I never told them. Because I didn't do it for them. But when Lena humiliated me in front of Noah, that was the moment I decided to speak. And this envelope was how I chose to do it. No shouting, no scenes, just paper, ink, and power. Lena finally looked up at me again, her voice steadier now but softer than I'd ever heard it. "You believe in me." The irony stung. I believe in everyone's right to prove themselves, including you. I turned, then walked back toward Noah. My heart beat steady, but my hands were cool. My feet felt grounded, like they were finally standing on something solid. When I reached him, he smiled and whispered, "That was kinda awesome." I smiled too, because it was. We rode the elevator down in silence. Noah leaned against my side, still holding my hand tight, like he didn't quite know what just happened, but knew it was big. The rooftop party was far behind us now. We left behind the laughter, the whispers, the stares. Left behind the people who had only ever seen one version of me. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't walking away feeling small. I was walking away free. When we stepped out into the cool night air, it wrapped around me like a blanket. The breeze caught the hem of my dress. The street lamps buzzed softly above. Somewhere in the distance, someone laughed, but it didn't sting this time. I opened the door to my old Corolla and helped Noah into his seat. He clicked his belt and looked over at me. "Mom," he said, hesitating. I looked up. "Were they mean to you?" I didn't lie. "Not this time. Yeah, a little." He was quiet for a second, thinking. Then he said, "But you didn't let them win." I smiled. "No, baby, I didn't." And then he smiled too, one of those proud little kid smiles that lights up their whole face, the kind that makes you forget every painful thing that came before. We drove home with the windows cracked just enough to let in the smell of night air and spring leaves. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't need noise. I just needed that silence, the kind that doesn't come from being ignored, but from finally being heard. Back in our apartment, Noah curled up on the couch while I changed out of my dress and pulled my hair into a bun. I looked in the mirror. Same tired eyes, same soft lines on my face, same woman. But something had shifted, not in the way I looked, but in the way I stood. There was a steadiness in my shoulders now, a quiet strength in my breath, the kind of strength you earn not from applause, but from walking through fire without losing your kindness. The next morning, I woke up early and made pancakes. Noah came into the kitchen, rubbing his eyes, dragging his favorite blanket behind him. "Chocolate chips?" he asked. "As many as you want." I smiled. He grinned and pulled out the syrup bottle like it was a magic wand. We ate in our tiny kitchen, sunlight spilling through the window and landing on the table like it had been waiting for us. No phones buzzing, no tension in my chest, no pretending, just a mom and her boy, eating pancakes, breathing easy. Later that afternoon, as I cleaned up the kitchen, my phone buzzed. A new message. It was from Lena. Just 5 words. "Can we talk, Lena?" I stood there holding the phone in one hand, the dish towel in the other. A few months ago, I would have answered immediately, out of guilt, out of habit, out of some old need to be accepted, but not this time. This time, I had something she never gave me the power to choose. I waited a few hours, then typed back, "Sure, but not today." And I meant it. That night, after Noah went to bed, I sat on the couch with a cup of tea. Just sitting, not rushing, not scrolling, just being still. The living room was quiet, except for the hum of the fridge and the soft ticking of the clock above the stove. I looked around the room, nothing fancy. A secondhand coffee table, a sofa with a small tear I never got around to fixing. But it felt like home, because now it wasn't filled with silence from being pushed aside. It was filled with peace from being true to myself. A few days later, Noah came home from school with a crooked smile and glitter on his shirt. "I made you something," he said, holding out a folded piece of construction paper. It was a card. On the front, in big wobbly handwriting, "My mom is a boss." Inside, he'd drawn me wearing a superhero cape, holding a giant check. I laughed, and then I cried. Right there in the doorway, glitter falling to the floor. Not because I was sad, but because I'd never felt prouder in my life. Not of the money, not of the moment on that rooftop, but of the fact that my son saw me not as someone broken, not as someone begging to belong, but as someone strong and kind and brave enough to stand tall when it mattered most. So no, Lena never really said sorry. Not in the way I used to dream of hearing it. But a few weeks later, when she came by to drop off a small package for Noah, she handed me something too. A simple gold bracelet. The tag said, "To the strongest sister I know." And that was enough. If this story touched something in you, if it reminded you of your own quiet strength or the times you were underestimated, take a moment to let us know. Leave a comment and tell us. Have you ever had your envelope moment? A time when you stood your ground, not with noise but with grace? Your story might just be the one someone else needs to hear today. Like this video, if you believe quiet strength is just as powerful as loud victories, share it with someone who's been through the fire and came out stronger. Because the world needs more reminders that success isn't always flashy. Sometimes it looks like a single mom holding her son's hand and refusing to shrink. Your voice matters even when it whispers, and trust me, someone's listening.